Hi everyone, my name is Nick Util, and this is a presentation regarding physician and practice level performance. For this presentation and analysis, we compiled the following data. Patient experience scores for 6 CG-CAPHS measures. CG-CAPHS is the Clinician and Group Consumer Assessment of Healthcare Providers and Systems. And these measures include care coordination, courteous and helpful office staff, getting timely care, appointments, and information, how well your providers communicate, patient's rating of the provider, and would the patient recommend the provider's office. Within this data, we have 2 service lines, internal medicine and family medicine. This includes 9 departments and 45 providers. And additionally, this survey information was collected between 2018 and 2020. Here we have the average patient experience score split up by each department, with the Arches department having the highest average patient experience score and Badlands having the lowest patient experience score. However, note that there is not much difference in average patient experience score between all departments. Additionally, in the lower graphic, we can see that when we split out the scores by service line, there is minimal difference between family medicine and internal medicine service line average patient experience scores. In total, we had 369,786 surveys returned by patients. As you can see in the top graphic, Bryce Canyon Department had the most surveys returned, with over 50,000 surveys returned. This accounted for almost 14% of surveys returned for all departments. Dry Tortugas, Big Bend, Arches, and Biscayne all have similar percentage of total surveys returned. Channel Islands, Badlands, Acadia, and Crater Lake accounted for 10% or less of returned surveys. As we can see in the below graphic, internal medicine accounted for almost 60% of these returned surveys. It may be beneficial to also look into ways to increase patient awareness of surveys and potential incentives of filing and returning these surveys for family medicine service line. In blue, we have the departments that contributed to 80% of the total number of surveys returned, while gray denotes departments that have contributed 20% to the total sum of surveys returned. For these 3 surveys that accounted for 20%, one reason for these departments contributing only 20% or less is that we do not have any 2020 survey data for these departments, while we have 2020 data for the other departments. Here we have a chart showing the departments that contributed to 80% of the total sum of surveys returned. It appears that during April, July, and November, between 2018 and 2020, there was a dip compared to the previous month in the amount of surveys that were returned for most departments, which shows that there could be a seasonal pattern to when these surveys are returned by the patients. Here we have the total surveys returned for all departments. The maximum number of surveys that were returned in a month was in September 2019, with 17,922, and the least amount was in March 2020, which was 756. From January 2018 to December 2020, the number of surveys returned decreased by over 11,000, with a large drop from December 2019 to January 2020. As I said in my previous slide, this could be partially because not every department had survey data for 2020. However, all departments did have data from 2018 to 2019, and as you can see, from January 2018 to December 2019, there was an increase in over 4,000 surveys returned. Here, we begin our comparison of the average patient experience score for all 6 of the clinician and group consumer and assessment of healthcare provider and system measures. Here we have a comparison of patient experience survey score for care coordination, which is the first measure. As you can see, all departments achieved average patient survey scores above the national benchmark of 79.6%. Here we have a comparison of the average patient experience score for another measure, which is courteous and helpful office staff. We have 5 departments below the national benchmark, which is 84.4%. Additionally, 4 out of 5 of these departments are internal medicine, with one of them being family medicine. Here's a comparison of patient experience survey score for getting timely care, appointments, and information. And as we can see here, all departments are well above the national benchmark of 69.8%. This is a comparison of the average patient experience score for how well your providers communicate. Unfortunately, all departments are below the national benchmark of 90.4%. Departments may need to look internally to understand where they lack communication-wise and how to increase the effectiveness of their communication to patients. Here's a comparison of average patient experience score for rating of provider. Unfortunately, once again, we have all departments are below the national benchmark of 87.2%. However, they are just barely below. Now, within the next 2 slides, I've split up by service line for patients' rating of provider, family medicine, and internal medicine, and have highlighted in red the individual providers by department which have average survey scores for rating of provider below the national benchmark of 87.2%. Here we have 14 out of 21 family medicine providers below the national benchmark of 87.2%. And here we have 17 out of 21 internal medicine providers below the national benchmark of 87.2 for rating of provider. This is over 80% and is higher than the 66% that were below the benchmark in the family medicine service line. Conclusions of this presentation include that there was the difference in average patient experience score between departments and service line was minimal. 6 of the 9 departments made up 80% of the total amount of surveys returned. Within these 6 departments, it appears that there may be a potential seasonal trend with decreases in surveys returned in April, July, and November. All departments are above the national benchmark for measures of care coordination and getting timely care, appointments, and information. 4 internal medicine departments had average patient experience scores below national benchmark for courteous and helpful staff. All department average patient survey scores were below national benchmarks for how well your providers communicate and rating of provider. And we had 5 internal medicine departments average patient experience scores below the national benchmark for would recommend provider's office. In all, believe that departments need to focus more on effective communication and understanding from patients how they can be better providers so patients can have a rewarding experience in the doctor's office. Thank you very much for your time, and I will take any questions at this point.